In 1954, Louis Vuitton opened its first store outside France. By 2024, the parent company was worth over $300 billion. The product did not change that dramatically. The leather is still leather. The canvas is still canvas. What changed was the code, the invisible system of signals, hierarchies, and psychological triggers built around the object that made it worth not what it costs, but what belonging to its world costs. That code exists. It runs everywhere. And nobody who profits from it wants you to read it. Please subscribe and activate the button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can bring you more relevant content and so YouTube can notify you when we publish new videos. Every luxury empire is built on a contradiction so fundamental that once you see it, the entire industry looks different. The contradiction is this: the more desirable a luxury product becomes, the more people want it. The more it penetrates the culture, the more widely its signal is recognized, the less valuable it becomes to the people who matter most to the brand. Because the people who matter most to a luxury brand are not the people who want the product. They are the people whose wanting it would make everyone else want it more. And those people stop wanting things the moment too many other people want them. The luxury brand exists in permanent tension between growth and meaning. Sell more, and you make more money. Sell more, and you destroy the signal. Destroy the signal, and eventually you destroy the brand. The brands that have survived this tension for a century have all found the same solution, not a compromise between growth and meaning, but a hierarchy. Growth in some categories, absolute protection of meaning in others. The commercial products fund the iconic ones. The iconic ones justify the commercial ones. The system works only if the hierarchy never collapses. This is the first layer of the hidden code. The luxury brand does not sell one thing. It sells two things simultaneously to two different audiences who rarely understand each other's relationship to the same object. The first audience is buying a product, a well-made object at a significant premium, justified by quality, heritage, and the specific pleasure of owning something genuinely excellent. This audience is real, significant, and commercially important. Without them, the economics do not work. The second audience is buying a position, not the object itself, but what the object communicates about the person who possesses it in the specific rooms, to the specific people, in the specific social register where the communication is legible. This audience is smaller, their individual transactions are larger, and their relationship to the brand is so different from the first audiences that they would be genuinely uncomfortable knowing they share an object with them. The brand manages this through tiers. Through the specific calibration of which products are available to whom, through which channels, under what conditions. The entry product welcomes the first audience and funds the operation. The apex product, the one that requires history, relationship, and a form of demonstrated belonging before it is even discussable, serves the second audience and defines the brand's position in the cultural hierarchy. Remove the apex and the entry product loses its meaning. The logo on the canvas bag derives its premium from the existence of the crocodile Birkin that almost no one will ever own. The watch in the glass case at the airport derives its legitimacy from the reference that requires 2 years of patience and a conversation with someone who has the discretion to decide whether you are the right person to own it. The visible product finances the invisible one. The invisible one justifies the visible one. And here is the part that the brand will never explain in any investor presentation or brand book or interview with any publication that might print it directly. The second audience, the apex customer, the person whose relationship to the brand operates entirely outside the consumer logic that governs everyone else's, is not a customer in any conventional sense. They are a co-author of the brand's meaning. Their association with the object is part of what the object means. Their presence in the world wearing, carrying, or simply owning the piece contributes to the cultural reality that makes the piece worth what it is worth to the first audience. The brand needs them more than they need the brand. And the brands that have managed this relationship most effectively, that have understood the apex customer's psychology, precisely enough to give them what they actually want while maintaining the commercial architecture that their purchasing underwrites. Those brands are the ones now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, the ones that confused the two audiences, that let the entry products dilute the apex, that chased volume in categories where volume was the enemy of meaning. Those brands spent the following decade trying to remember what they were. Some of them are still trying. The code is not complicated once you see it. But seeing it requires understanding something about human desire that most business schools do not teach and most brand consultants only partially grasp. Desire is not a response to quality. Desire is a response to distance, to the specific, calibrated, psychologically precise distance between where you are and where the object lives. Collapse the distance and you collapse the desire. Maintain it forever, at exactly the right measurement, and you have something that compounds indefinitely. The most dangerous word in the luxury industry is accessible. Not because accessibility is commercially unattractive in the short term, it is extremely attractive. Every time a luxury brand lowers a barrier, opens a new category, launches a product at a price point that reaches a broader audience, the revenue line responds. The quarterly numbers improve. The analysts write favorable notes. The executives who made the decision receive validation that feels, in the moment, like confirmation that the strategy was correct. And then, 18 months later, something harder to measure begins to happen. The apex customer starts visiting less frequently, not dramatically, not in a single defection that triggers an alarm, in the specific quiet way that serious customers withdraw when they sense that something they valued has been made available to people they do not want to share it with. Their spend does not disappear immediately. They have relationships with specific people at the brand. They have products on order, they have inertia. But the emotional temperature of the relationship changes. It cools. And when the emotional temperature of an apex relationship cools, what is lost cannot be recovered by any marketing campaign at any budget. Because what was lost was not preference. It was the specific feeling, intimate, personal, irreplaceable, that the brand understood who they were and protected what that meant. The feeling that their relationship with the brand was not a commercial transaction but a mutual recognition. Brands are run by people who understand this at the theoretical level. The failure happens at the operational level in the gap between the understanding and the discipline required to act on it when the commercial pressure is real and immediate and the consequence of protecting the signal is invisible and deferred. Here is a number that makes this concrete. In the early 2000s, one of the most recognized luxury monograms in the world was counterfeited at an estimated rate that meant more fake versions of the product existed globally than real ones. The brand's response was not to reduce visibility. It was to accelerate aspiration to move the conversation so aggressively toward the apex products that the monogram itself became, in the cultural discourse of the brand's most important customers, a category they had already moved past. The counterfeit problem was solved not by enforcement but by repositioning the authentic product so far above the counterfeit's ambition that the comparison became meaningless. The code at work again. Distance as the instrument, elevation as the solution. Now watch how the same logic operates in the management of secondary markets, because this is where the strategy reveals a dimension that most observers, including sophisticated financial analysts, consistently misread. The secondary market for significant luxury pieces, the auction results, the resale platforms, the private transactions between collectors is not a problem that luxury brands tolerate. For the brands that manage it correctly, it is the most effective marketing apparatus they have never had to pay for. When a Rolex Daytona sells at the secondary market for 3 times its retail price, that transaction does not occur in a vacuum. It circulates. It enters the conversation of every person who follows the brand with any seriousness. It communicates more powerfully than any advertisement could that the object is not merely desirable. It is a store of meaning that the market values independently of the brand's own pricing decisions. The brand did not make that argument. The market made it. And a market argument carries a credibility that a brand argument never can, because it is not in the brand's interest to make it. The secondary market premium is proof that the scarcity was real, that the mythology was earned, that the gap between production cost and retail price is not the brand's commercial ambition, it is the market's assessment of what the meaning is worth. Which means the brand's job is not to justify the price. It is to maintain the conditions under which the market keeps justifying it for them. That distinction between a brand that defends its pricing and a brand that creates the conditions under which the market defends its pricing is one of the most consequential strategic differences in the entire luxury industry. The brands that understand it do not talk about price. They talk about rarity, about legacy, about the specific irreproducibility of what they make, and why that irreproducibility matters to the kind of person for whom it would matter. And the market responds by placing a number on what that conversation is worth. The number is always higher than the brand would have dared to ask for directly. That is not an accident. That is the code operating exactly as designed. There is a room inside every significant luxury conglomerate, not a metaphorical room. A specific room with specific people in it where decisions get made that the public face of the brand will never acknowledge, and that the brand's own marketing department often does not fully understand. The decisions made in that room are not about products. They are about access. Specifically, which customers are permitted to access which products, through which relationships, under what conditions, and with what communication about the meaning of the access being granted. These decisions are made with a precision that would seem excessive if you did not understand what is actually being managed. What is being managed is the social architecture of the brand's meaning. The apex customer who receives an allocation of the season's most significant piece before it is shown publicly is not receiving a commercial benefit. They are receiving communication. The communication says, "You are inside." Not inside the store, inside the world the store represents. The world of people for whom this brand exists at its highest expression. The world whose membership is the real product. That communication produces something in the recipient that no financial return could replicate. It produces loyalty that is not transactional. And loyalty that is not transactional is the most commercially valuable form of loyalty that exists, because it does not respond to competitive offers. It does not recalibrate when a competitor releases a technically superior product. It does not weaken when the brand has a difficult season or makes a creative decision that the market does not immediately embrace. It holds. Because what it is holding is not a preference for a product. It is an identity, a sense of belonging to something that the person has integrated into how they understand themselves. Dismantling that integration costs more psychologically than any rational calculation of competing products would justify. The brands know this. They manage it deliberately. Every touchpoint in the apex customer relationship, the communication, the events, the access, the specific quality of attention from people within the brand whose role is to maintain these relationships is calibrated toward deepening the integration. Not deepening the commercial relationship. Deepening the identity relationship. Because the commercial relationship follows the identity relationship automatically as a natural consequence of belonging. You do not need to sell to someone who has made your brand part of who they are. You simply need to keep being what they need you to be. Now here is the dimension of this that most external analysis of luxury brands never reaches. The apex customer relationship is not only a commercial asset, it is an intelligence network. The people who constitute a luxury brand's apex customer base are, by definition, among the most culturally influential individuals in the markets where the brand operates. They shape taste. They set the visual vocabulary of their social environments. They make the purchasing decisions that the aspirational tiers below them observe and eventually replicate. Their relationship to the brand, what they carry, what they wear, what they choose, and what they visibly move past is a real-time signal about where the culture is going that no market research can replicate. The brand that maintains genuine, trusted relationships with these people has access to the future before the future is legible to anyone else. And the decisions made based on that access about which directions to develop, which categories to enter, which stories to tell, and which to retire are the decisions that explain why the brands at the top of the luxury hierarchy always seem to be exactly where the culture is going. They are not following the culture. They are reading it. Through the relationships they built before they needed the information. Through the trust they earned before the trust was worth anything commercially. Through the consistent, patient, generation-spanning practice of caring genuinely about the right people and letting that caring produce the intelligence that everyone else is trying to buy. Intelligence cannot be bought. It can only be earned. And the earning takes longer than any investment cycle, any management tenure, any strategic planning horizon that the public companies in this space are willing to commit to. Which is why the private ones, Hermès, Chanel, Patek Philippe, keep winning the long game. They are not managed for the next quarter. They are managed for the next generation. And the code they are running was written by people who will never see the full return on what they built. That is the point. Everything we have covered, the hierarchy of audiences, the secondary market architecture, the intelligence network of apex relationships, is how the code operates commercially. But there is a deeper layer. The layer where the code stops being about commerce entirely and becomes something considerably older and more consequential. What comes next is where luxury stops being an industry and becomes a system of power. Here is the reversal that changes everything. The luxury brand is not the product of the culture it operates in. It is one of the primary architects of that culture. This distinction sounds subtle. It is not. The difference between a brand that reflects cultural values and a brand that produces cultural values is the difference between a mirror and a projector. Mirrors show you what exists. Projectors create what will exist. The most powerful luxury brands are projectors. They do not observe the hierarchy they generate. They do not reflect what status means to their generation of customers. They determine what status means. And the mechanism through which they exercise this function is storytelling. But not storytelling in the way marketing departments use the word, not the brand narrative, the heritage video, the founder's biography rendered in cinematic black and white, something more fundamental. The luxury brand tells the culture a story about what a good life looks like, what a successful person owns, what does taste mean, what quality means, what it looks like to have arrived, to have earned something, to belong to the category of people who understand the difference between what is genuinely excellent and what merely appears to be. That story is not neutral. It is constructed by specific people with specific commercial interests in the story being believed. And it is maintained through advertising, through cultural placement, through the specific people chosen to carry the brand's objects in public with a consistency and a resource commitment that ensures it remains the dominant story. The story against which all competing stories about value, taste, and arrival are measured and found insufficient. The shock of this, when it lands fully, is considerable. The standard against which you have been measuring your own progress, the picture of what having enough looks like, what having arrived means, what the version of yourself that would finally feel complete possesses, that standard was not developed by you. It was installed by institutions with a commercial interest in the standard being defined in ways that require continuous spending to approach, and that are structurally designed to recede as you advance toward them. You are running toward a finish line that moves. The brands own the finish line. Now apply this understanding to the specific mechanism through which luxury brands extend their cultural authority beyond their own product categories, because this is where the influence becomes genuinely systemic. A luxury fashion house that dresses the most culturally significant figures of a generation is not making a costume decision. It is making a meaningful transfer decision. The cultural authority carried by the figures being dressed, the specific combination of artistic credibility, social influence, and aspirational weight they represent attaches to the brand through the association. The brand's aesthetic becomes linked, in the cultural memory of everyone who witnesses the association, with the qualities those figures represent. This meaning transfer is permanent. It survives the individual association. It accumulates across every subsequent association, building a density of cultural meaning that eventually becomes independent of any single figure or moment. The brand no longer needs to borrow meaning from culturally significant individuals. It has accumulated enough meaning of its own that culturally significant individuals now borrow meaning from it. That reversal from meaning borrower to meaning lender is the threshold at which a brand becomes a genuine cultural institution rather than a commercially successful business. And the brands that have crossed it are protected by a form of competitive moat that no product innovation and no marketing budget can breach from the outside. The moat is the cultural consensus. And the cultural consensus was built through decades of exactly the kind of investment that quarterly focused commercial thinking would have defunded at every stage. Here is the practical consequence of this for anyone trying to understand how power actually operates in the current global economy. The institutions that control cultural meaning, that determine what success looks like, what taste is, what the markers of legitimate authority are, those institutions have power that extends far beyond their own industries. The luxury brand that has established itself as the arbiter of quality in its category has established, simultaneously, a claim to cultural authority in every adjacent domain where quality is a relevant concept. That authority shapes hiring decisions, investment decisions, political assessments, the instinctive social calculations that determine whose opinion is weighted, whose presence in a room is valued, whose judgment is trusted. The luxury code is not only a commercial system, it is the operating system of social authority. And the people who wrote it knew exactly what they were writing. There is a person who understood this code before most people knew it existed. Not a brand strategist, not a consultant, not an academic who mapped the system retrospectively in a paper that 12 people read. Someone who grew up inside one of the families that built the system, who watched the decisions being made at the level where the commercial logic and the cultural logic and the social logic were understood as a single, unified instrument, and who absorbed, through proximity and observation, an understanding of the mechanism that most people spend careers trying to partially reconstruct from the outside. She understood what people who grew up inside these structures understand in their bones in a way that no education can fully replicate, is that the code is not primarily about products. It was never about products. The products are the interface, the visible, purchasable, photographable surface through which the system makes contact with the broadest possible population. What the system is actually about is what it has always been about, from the first artisan who understood that restricting supply of something beautiful creates a desire that unrestricted supply never could, is the management of human belonging. The fundamental human need to belong, to be inside rather than outside, to be recognized as someone who understands, who has earned, who occupies a position in the hierarchy of taste and cultivation that is not available to everyone. That need is not shallow. It is not the vanity of the insecure or the performance of the inadequate. It is one of the most primary human motivations that exists, the need to be seen, to be placed correctly in the social order, to have the interior experience of one's worth confirmed by something external to the self. The luxury system did not create that need, it found it, and it built the most profitable business in the history of consumer commerce on top of it. The understanding of this does not make the need disappear. Nothing makes the need disappear. What it does is return the need to its owner. You still want to belong. That is human and real and not something to be ashamed of or argued away. But belonging to what? Defined by whom? On terms established by whom? For whose benefit, measured against standards whose definition was outsourced to organizations with a commercial interest in the standards, remaining permanently out of reach? Those are questions that the person who has read the code can ask. The person who has not read it cannot ask them. They are too busy running. Now consider what the code, fully read, makes possible from the other side. The same principles that built the luxury empires described in this video. The management of scarcity, the investment in narrative, the deliberate cultivation of the apex relationship, the patient construction of cultural meaning over timelines that extend beyond any individual career. Those principles are not proprietary. They are not locked inside the conglomerates that currently execute them at the highest level. They are available to anyone who applies them with the discipline and the patience that they require. Every business that commands a premium beyond what its material components justify is doing some version of this. Every personal brand that generates influence beyond what its credentials alone would produce is running some version of this code. Every institution that maintains authority across generations long after the specific historical moment that established its initial credibility has passed is executing the long-form version of exactly what we have been describing. The code is the template. The luxury empires are the proof of concept. The discipline required to execute it is the willingness to protect meaning over revenue, to maintain distance over accessibility, to invest in story over specification, to think in generations over quarters. That discipline is genuinely rare. It is rare in organizations and rarer in individuals. But it is not mysterious. It is a choice, made consistently, over time, against the specific pressures that every successful enterprise faces when growth is available, and the cost of capturing it is paid not today, but years from now in a currency, cultural authority, signal integrity, apex customer trust that does not appear in this year's financial statements. The brands that made that choice correctly are worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The ones that did not are worth considerably less or are not worth discussing at all. The code was always readable. The only thing required to read it was the willingness to look at what was actually there, rather than what the brands needed you to see. You have looked. The code is in your hands now. What you build with it is entirely yours. Luxury power exists for one reason only: to reveal what the elite pay to hide. Subscribe to Luxury Power and hit the bell now. Every week a new secret is uncovered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing our global audience. Everything you saw here is based on real cases, verified contracts, and documented facts. We don't glorify wealth, we dissect it. Do you still think money buys freedom? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see the truth. And remember, Even the most expensive life can be a gilded cage. See you in the next video.